let's get cooking. We have a huge room. This is amazing. Welcome everybody. I'm Brian Portnoy, founder of Shaping Wealth, and this is the December 2022 episode of Chopping Wealth, one of the key features of the OCBO platform, where we chop it up with experts like my friend, Dr. Moira Somers. Moira, good to see you.
You too.
I have like 3 hours of questions that we're going to squeeze in the next 57 minutes. Take a moment and tell everybody who you are. Quick headline summary, and then we're gonna jump in.
Well, today I'm sitting in my clinic office. So my role as a clinician, as a clinical neuropsychologist, working with people often in very hard times of their life, and dealing with life-ending diseases, things like that. So that's where I am today. But in other days of the week, I am dealing with people with much happier kinds of issues, like how do we get to be better at advice delivery, and what does this money that's in my life, what does it really mean for me? So I have a varied work life, and that's a real blessing.
So I want to start off with a big picture question, something I've been thinking a fair bit about lately, and that's just on the topic of change. Why do human beings find change hard? Or I think maybe a more sophisticated version of the question is, what types of change do people struggle with?
In some ways we change all the time, and it happens even at the cellular level outside of our awareness, in ways that work for our well-being. But we struggle when we have to be active agents in that change often, especially if it involves any kind of discomfort. And so we are much more likely to just stick with status quo at such times. Status quo is really kind of one of the biggest barriers to change that we have, even if it's not working particularly well. And sometimes even indeed because it's not working particularly well, we get into cycles of that are just hard to get rid of because or hard to get out of because we're just so tuckered out. Another thing that can make it really hard to change, Brian, and this might sound weird, is sometimes we forget our own best intentions. I mean, have you ever gone through a period where you've just resolved you're going to eat better, but at 9 o'clock at night, your arm is somehow elbow deep in that chip bag, and so sometimes we just forget that we were supposed to do things differently. And if we don't have systems set up to help us make that change, then it can be extra hard. But as I said, people do make change all the time in ways that are really pleasing to them. So if we can harness the best of what we know from that and have a really healthy respect for status quo and forgetting in particular, that'd be good.
It would be good. Let's bridge into kind of the main arena here, which is the world of financial advice, the world of wealth management. And you wrote a book a few years ago that I think is just wonderful, called Advice That Sticks. And for those on the call today who have not purchased and read the book, I would highly recommend doing that. It's a wonderful blend of science and wisdom on such an important topic, which is, to what extent should advisors be responsible for clients having adherence to the advice that is given? And I want to come at that project, that book, from a number of different angles. Let me start with the one that I think is the elephant in the room. And you and I had the pleasure of seeing you last week at a conference up in Toronto, and you had so many smart things to say about this. The elephant in the room is that when it comes to our clients following our advice, save more, spend less, invest for the long run, all that, all those kind of good things. Part of your big thesis, it seems to me, is that the advisor is part of the problem. That it's just not about, you know, individuals being non-compliant. It's about good advice being delivered badly and therefore not adhered to. Can you kind of open and broaden that discussion topic, because I suspect that the group here today is really going to want to click for detail in a few different ways.
Mm. And I would just love for people to chime in on this. How many years we looked at all of the years that everybody listening to this call today has spent in school and in education, how much you and I have spent, Brian, as people with doctorates and postdoctorates. We spend so much time, we invest so much in getting the technical expertise we need to do in order to have some kind of good advice to give.
Mhm.
But there are very few training programs that actually spend any amount of time on how do you give that advice well. And for some strange reason, the master of the universe decided to give people free will and allow people to put things through the filter of their own decision making, right? Like, does this make sense to me at this time, in these circumstances? What's it going to take to follow through with this? And so if we don't know how to get beyond the technical and really figure out, is this what this person is able to do at this point in time? I know it's my best advice, but if it's not possible for them, if they are too tuckered out, if it would actually, in some cases, be dangerous for people to follow through with this financial advice because it would cause huge uproars in their family life, or huge conflict, for example, then how do I find out just where are their hearts and minds in alignment with this advice? How do I come on board with them, and recognize their expertise, which is different from mine, right? Mine might be in this technical area, theirs is on their own life. And so if we learn from the best of what other professions are figuring out, in decision-making science, in medicine, even in various aspects of consumer studies and engineering, what it seems that all boils down to, we need to become implementation partners with our clients or our patients, whatever, figuring out together what makes sense, what's going to get in the way of what makes sense, and how can we help each other. And so sometimes that's, sometimes advisors do kind of mess it up. They use language that's so incomprehensible to most people, right? That's one example.
Yeah.
Or their own processes, in terms of getting people on board, or the particular advice they have to give is so filled with sludge. It's just, there's barrier after barrier after barrier, and people just default to the status quo. So the good news is that just as we become technically proficient in whatever field it is we're giving advice, we can also develop some, I would say it's technical expertise of a different kind, but it's, we can get really skilled. There are best practices on how to deliver advice.
All right, this is awesome. All right, so I want to thin slice this, and we're already getting great questions in the chat. First, and from you, I learned that I should be using the word adherence, not compliance. So I don't know if there's a material distinction there. So I'm going to use the word adherence. But I want to ask a sequence of short questions. One is, what is the cost of non-adherence, not only to the client, but to the advisor? And then as we sort of build a groundwork for truly delivering advice that sticks, I know you've taken so much inspiration and actual empirical research from the medical field. I want to I want to veer into that before we maybe go into your model and address some of the questions that are showing up in the chat. So first, the cost of non-adherence for not only client but advisor, and then let's talk about what we learned from other fields that can make financial advice even better.
Sure. Well, I mean, the obvious, because the obvious aspect of not following good financial advice is that you don't get the kinds of outcomes that you're looking for. You may save insufficiently. You may fail to safeguard. You may fail to buy insurance. You may fail to have tender and productive money conversations. You may fail to teach your kids about money. I mean, think about all of the different. You may buy high and sell low. You may miss out on opportunities. You may get attracted to opportunities that are really, really risky. So we kind of know what the financial outcomes are or can be.
You made a comment recently that when we were together about the impact it has on advisors when
Sure.
they, an advisor is giving advice that she has years and years of experience that led to good advice, and the client won't take it. How does that impact an advisor? How does that impact an advice firm?
Well, there's all kinds of different ways. To just finish up with the client, though, because it feeds into this other thing.
Sure.
Although it may seem like, the client's got all the discretion here, all the power, the fact is that most clients do not feel good about it when they are not following through. They are embarrassed. They often feel like they're letting the advisor down. They may become really dispirited because they've tried to do this thing so many times in the past, for example. And so it begets this cycle of like non-adherence leading to avoidance, which leads to no-shows, which leads to, in some ways, decision. It leads to disgruntlement with the advisor. And it can ultimately lead to the decision to leave the practice, because what people really want is help getting into action and feeling optimistic and feeling safe and knowing that they're making progress. That's what all of us want from the people that we consult. So, of course, if that sort of worst case scenario takes place, how it affects the advisor and the advisory firm is that you lose clients, or you're constantly kind of cleaning up after them or having to nip at their heels. Non-adherent clients often take more effort of caregiving and following up and trying to like wrestle this document that you need out of them. But just like there's sort of an emotional cost to the client, there's often also an emotional cost to the advice giver. And we see this in every profession. When you feel dispirited as the advisor, when you feel like you've got this, like if only they would just do this thing that would safeguard them, but they're not, it can lead to everything from just discouragement or disdain building up all the way up to moral injury. When you see people, when you have to watch as people torpedo their own lives or can't do the right thing. And so that leads to, burnout and decisions to kind of leave. It can lead to ethical violations as well. But this has taken a really negative turn, Dr. Portnoy. We should talk about all the blessed things that happen when we get it right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, just I think we might be preaching to the choir in terms of people on this call really wanting to understand how it is that they can become partners, implementation partners with clients. What is it that you have to do kind of intellectually? How do you have to set up your practice from a behavioral economics point of view? What kinds of systems do you have to put in place to make sure that stuff doesn't just plummet through the cracks, um, and make it harder for everybody to get stuff done, or turn you into this sheepdog who's spending so much time trying to follow up with clients that you can't do the other important parts of your job. So
Right.
if we could, really look at some of those best practices, that would be a good to do.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we're in a problem solution framework here. So
We are.
we've defined the problem, and I don't think anybody on the call is surprised with the problem, but you do have a nuanced take, especially the problems that it creates on the advice side. It's pretty
Mm,
clear what the problems are on the client side. So let's go to your framework. Your call on whether your training in the medical field, if you want to touch on what you've learned, what you've seen there. But I know you've got kind of a I'll call it a 5-factor model that speaks to all of the different ways in which advisors can be implementation partners. I know that you have a pretty cool framework to just ask the simple question: is the client ready to hear and follow the advice I'm giving them? So how about you plant the flag where you want, and then we'll go in some different directions, because there's a lot of different nuances in here.
Sure. Yeah. I've been a professor at a medical school for I'm just ending my first year of my professional life, actually, where I haven't been a professor at a medical school. But for a couple of decades, this was kind of my daily accompaniment, was thinking about how do we help people get better at this, and how do I get better at this as a clinician myself. And it really helped me when I got stuck with
Mhm.
a patient to realize that although I want to zone in on what's going on in the client's mind, and the client's physiology, what's going on that might be making it hard for this person to follow through. That's a pretty important domain to be aware of course. But it turns out there are 4 other contributors, and I gave them the acronym FACT to help people remember what they are. Um, the first has to do with the domain in which you're giving advice. So for the people on this call, the F is for financial, right? And for me as a neuropsychologist, it would obviously be healthcare kinds of advice, but finances, what contributes to people being able to follow financial advice in particular? And of course, it has to do with their history with money, with their values, their attitudes, their experience, their financial literacy. And so sometimes you have to think about, am I aiming my advice, at the right level for this person? We talked at the conference last week about some of the, moving on to the A in the FACT model, that there is just some kinds of advice that's harder to take than others, right?
Mhm.
Is it pleasant, this act? If if you prescribe chocolate, or as one girlfriend got prescribed uh, ale, like stout, after she had a baby. She did not have any problem following that advice whatsoever. But is it yucky to follow this advice? Is it short term or long term? Does it cause me any discomfort? Does it ease my discomfort? So looking at, what is it that you're asking people to do? And if you're asking them to do stuff like, put an estate plan in place, or save when they've been accustomed to just spending willy-nilly, you've got an uphill battle.
Right,
This
right. And can you say a little bit, so relieving an immediate pain point versus solving a problem that doesn't exist yet, where or something that could happen? We do a fair amount of work with clients on the future self, and thinking about the things that you might experience in the future, forms of anticipated regret and things like that. And I think it's fair to say that the further in the future, the vaguer the pain point, the harder it is to get people sort of attached and motivated. Is that just something that we have to accept as, hey, that's the way we are? Or is there a strategy, are there strategies or an opportunity to somehow create pain in the near term for something that won't happen in the long term? And I'm not
Right.
challenging your ethical direction here, but you know where I'm going.
Sure. So for example, one of the characteristics of advice that might make it hard to follow is how wide-ranging it is.
Mhm.
Um, so if we can just help people identify what is the one thing that they're able to do right now, just one thing, right? What is the smallest possible next step that you can take? So that we don't worry about the 99 steps they have to take after that, but just right here, right now. For every one of the characteristics of advice that make it hard to take, you can build in buffers, encouragers, supports. You can chop it up a little bit. You can monitor it more. There are things you can do for virtually every aspect of the situation that will just make it more likely that the client can do the thing you're asking them to do.
Mhm.
So if you think about, like, what is one of the hardest things for people to do? When I ask advisors that, they tell me all the time, it's getting the estate plan done. Right? And yeah, no wonder that would be like the poster case for advice that's hard to take. And so learning how to slice each aspect of what makes estate planning hard, and then just make sure that we've got supports in place for all aspects of that, or that we can, that we at least talk to the client about what might make that easier to follow through with.
Mhm.
The C, it has to do with the clients and client characteristics, including things like, are they in the middle of a major life transition? Which is one of the things that can really tucker people out, and seems to be a very fraught period in the advising relationship. Transitions are often when people reach out for financial advice. It also seems to be when they change advisors. The T has to do with characteristics of the team, the advisor and the team that surrounds her or him. And there was some interesting research. I haven't seen replication on this lately, Brian, but there, in the 90s, in the early thousands, there was some evidence that the advisor and the team accounted for more of the variance and follow through than the patient characteristics.
Hmm.
It's like, holy cow. And it just had to do with stuff like, how warm are you?
Mhm.
Right? Have you made does the client just have a sure sense that you've got them, you've got their back, you're on their side, or not, right? Other things that the advisor and the team do that can make or break include, do they have systems put in place for follow-up? Do they resort to jargon? So those would be some of the things that go into the T, that the fourth aspect of that 5-part model that the research
Mhm.
seems to drop out time and time again. And then the fifth and final domain has to do with the social surroundings, the environment that the client is in. And that includes all of the beautiful, rich stuff from behavioral economics, including what are the defaults and the nudges and the sludge that exists, as well as who's populating this person's life. What kinds of support do they have that would make follow through with this particular action you're recommending more or less likely? Who's going to be upset by this advice? Who's going to be delighted by this?
All right, so we've kind of set the stage. We have facts, FACTS. We've got our 5 dimensions. I have a few questions for sure, but in the Q&A, Jason asks, is there a right way to do the smallest possible next step, to use to use your phrasing, Maura? He said, way number 1, just tell the client one simple thing to do and send them away. Way number 2, give the client a list of a dozen micro tasks and send them away, and then use nudges of some kind along the way to kind of keep them moving forward. So I don't know if those are the only 2, or if you would phrase the choice set differently, but I see it both personally and professionally. Getting small wins along the way feels right. How would you encourage or coach advisors and advice teams to create a sort of more small wins type environment?
Yeah, it's hard to talk about it in the abstract,
Yeah,
because
make it
some
simple.
people, that would be just ridiculous, right? They don't need things broken down. They're just like champing at the bit, like, just let me at it now that I know what I'm supposed to do. But for clients who are discouraged, for clients for whom this is a big ask, this task, whatever it might be, then you want to co-create that list, would be my best advice, right? Like, if they're clueless, then, if they have no idea, if they're totally stymied about how could I possibly, let's say you've got an overspending client and they've agreed that they need to get this reined in, but they have no idea how they could stop. You could give them a few ideas about how, where other people have found money that's quite easy to kind of deal with, like those unused subscriptions, for example. But then you just want to have that discussion with them, because remember what their expertise is. Their expertise is their life. Their expertise is their behavioral history. And their expertise is their knowledge of their triggers. And so you really want to get them to start being curious and compassionate observers of themselves, and say, okay, why don't we start with these ones? You seem to have the most juice for this. Let's see how that goes.
Right.
But Jason is right that you are right that progress begets progress. Just like non-adherence leads to more non-adherence. It's what people need is a little bit of help often in getting started. And because much of what leads to intentional non-adherence, like somebody who knows that they should do it, but keeps putting it off, for example, is just emotional discomfort. I did my doctoral dissertation on procrastination, and not being able to tolerate the discomfort of starting this thing is what leads most people to kick a task down the road. But if you can just help people tolerate that little bit of discomfort involved in getting started, then they're usually able to just keep it going. Then, of course, you might have the pressure of an external deadline that removes most of the choice from you. And so therefore, again, you don't have to go through the pain of deciding.
I didn't know that was your dissertation. I got to say, that's the most brilliant dissertation topic ever, because I wrote a dissertation having nothing to do about procrastination, but was defined only by procrastination. Which is why I spent forever and a day in graduate school. That's fabulous. So I am really fascinated about what we can learn from other fields like medicine, but not only medicine. And I recall you saying once that the old model of delivering medicine, of being a doctor, was that the expert shows up and says, hey, I've diagnosed you, and here's your problem, and here's your pill or your procedure, and there you go. And the doctor sort of filled all of the space with words and verbiage, and it was the job of the patient to listen sort of passively and compliantly, and then just do what he or she is told. To what extent has the medical profession figured out a better path forward, and what empirically are the lessons we've learned from them or other fields that we can implement right into the world of financial advice?
Mhm. I think it's an onward, there's progress being made all the time, but what we're still left with in the end is, the man or the woman with boots on the ground in the office with somebody that they really want to help. And sometimes they don't know how to do it. And so certainly within medical schools, more and more training is being given to this very problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't been done in the same way within the domain of financial services or, CFP, CFA training. It's think about something like human factors engineering. What goes into designing tamper-proof containers? First we made sure that the containers were really tamper-proof, and boy, that was helpful, unless of course you were a senior citizen who couldn't, or you had some sort of problem with your hands, right? It's like, oh, we've overcorrected, or we've made a solution that's good for somebody, not so good for somebody else. And so within many domains, there are these efforts now to make sure that we are putting in the right kinds of nudges that are helpful to consumers, things like, and sometimes they might even delay consumers, like cooling off periods. And efforts are being made to reduce the barriers that don't need to be there. But yeah, so within medicine, I would say there's training at every aspect of medicine. But still, what often gets in the way is the individual's frustration and just the sense of, oh, they would do so much better if they would just listen to me. And so sometimes there's that ego component, and we just, and what happens in a relationship when judgment or disdain creep in, spoiler alert, it's not good. And so there also then becomes a need for advisors to be willing to acknowledge what's going on inside of them, right? Like, I am feeling judgy here. I do have this. And I could be the offspring of Meryl Streep and Sir Laurence Olivier, but I still am not going to be able to act well enough so that judgment is not affecting me or the client or our relationship in some way. So rather than just pretending it's not there, can you take time to settle yourself? Can you take time to be curious about, okay, what got it going this time? And usually it amounts to, there's some degree of fear that the client's not going to do well if they don't do this thing. And I really want them to do this thing, because if they do this thing, they would be better off, and so you have this story around it. And it gets you worked up. And what we really need to do is cultivate the willingness to hear our own stories, cultivate the willingness to check in with ourselves, first of all. What's going on? Is there any of this stuff here? Am I walking around like this expert on everything, not just my technical knowledge, but am I walking around like I actually do know what's best for them in all ways at all times? And if so, do you have a way to then nudge yourself back into your lane? which runs parallel with theirs, to say, hey, how can we work together on this?
I want to kind of ask about, how do I put this? Whether or not your book, Advice That Sticks, has stuck with its intended audience, which is financial advisors, maybe assessing. So, and because you coach advisors and advisory teams throughout North America, maybe globally, and so you meet a lot of us advisors all of the time. How would you grade the general industry self-awareness of the depth and scope and definition of this implementation problem, this need for implementation partners?
Mm. I'd say there's just huge variability.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's not a normal distribution. I'd say it's a little skewed to the right and to the left, in terms of advisors not being very willing to look at themselves in this area. But in part, that's just training, right? How do you know if you don't know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my thought. I don't know, Brian, what do you? I think there's always been a group of people who are in it because they really want to make a positive difference in people's lives, even as they also appreciate the chance to make a good living.
Mm-hmm.
But what is your sense? I'm sensing more of a hunger to do things in this aligned kind of way, but it could be that I have just a sort of a skewed response or a skewed audience.
Yeah, I mean, my quick answer is that I always try to be a little bit self-aware of the sample bias in what I'm observing, because people who I tend to talk to, people who tend to work with the team at Shaping Wealth, have already gone pretty far down the path and thinking about, here's what I want to do better. They want to go from good to great, or from great to awesome. If you leaving aside just flat out brokers who are just selling stuff,
Mhm.
if you think that you know the right answer and it's simply the job of the advisor to take your advice, and if the job of the client to take the advice, and if the client doesn't take the advice, well, that's on them.
Mhm.
You told them what to do. I'm guessing that there are tons of people out there who are just like that. So
Yeah.
hard to say.
In some ways, you kind of have to have a bit of that in there, right? Like there is that free will thing, and it is on them. In the end, they're the ones with the veto power.
Yeah.
My concern is just, are we willing to take a look at those data from the studies earlier, saying that the advisor has a huge role to play in follow through?
Yeah.
Are we willing to look at that? So yeah, but on the other end of the spectrum are people who say, oh, what is that book called? I think it's called The Advice Trap or something. This whole notion that we should all be like life coaches and help people to discover the meaning within, or the answer within. And I would say, that I don't like that model. I don't think that's a good model for most of medicine or financial advising, because there are some really technical things that need to be known, and the patient or the client comes in and just needs to know that you know it, and needs to know that you can communicate or help bring to pass what needs to happen. So I'm not one of those people who thinks that advice is a dirty word.
Yeah.
I think I highly respect what what people know as a result of their training and experience. And I want to make sure that I put myself as a consumer of advice in a room with folks who know their stuff and who can help me do my part, or can tell me what it is that I need to do and help me when I get discouraged. You know, the best personal trainer I ever had, Brian, was a guy who said at the outset of the training, I can help you when you're sore. I can help you when, if you come in injured from something. I can help you when you're discouraged and you don't want to be here. I can help you when you're mad. The only thing I can't help with is when you don't show up.
Yeah.
And I would like to be able to create that same sort of environment for the people that I work with, and would argue that that's what all of us should be aiming for. Can
Yeah.
help you with anything, just show up with us.
A couple really nice little comments in the chat. One from Phil Perlman, who says that it must be incredibly frustrating to not be able to get people to act in their own best interests. And I think that probably everybody on this call shares that sentiment. And then Michelle Bagina observed earlier on, she loved your question, quote, "Is this what this person is able to do at this time?" She said it was very wise. And I think it's a perfect bridge to an important topic, which is readiness, which we've kind of circled but not really gone into. How should we think about someone's kind of receptiveness or readiness to take the advice that we're giving them? Because it might be the best advice in the world, but if they're not ready, and I'll put ready in quotes, then it's all going to sort of just evaporate. Is there an approach? Is there a method? Are there best practices that you've observed in coaching this topic that we should follow your lead on?
Let's say that you've asked them to get all their paperwork over to you. Maybe they need to switch from an old advisor to you, and you need them to sign some paperwork, that sort of thing. And it's a simple ask, right? It's a signature. Maybe you've got DocuSign. Maybe you can do this really quickly, and it's not happening. And so that would be a point for you to say, to do this readiness assessment that we teach at medical school, which is essentially 3 questions, and you can ask them in different ways. It's not magical wording, but it essentially goes like, does this seem like a sensible next step? Is this the most important thing that we should be doing right now?
Okay.
From my point of view, I don't think I can do anything until I get this stuff that I need, but I've asked for this a few times and it's not happening. So let's just talk about, is this the next step for you? Is this the most important thing?
Okay.
Right. So that's a variation on the first question, right? Are we in alignment that this is the right thing and this is the right time? And then the second question has to do with, so tell me why. Let's say that, yep, getting stuff from my advisor, we're in agreement, that's the most important thing that I need to do now. Why? Well, because if I don't, I can't do anything else. You can't do anything on my behalf, and I'm going to not continue to have the problems that I've had in working with somebody that I'm not good with. And I'm really hoping that if I work with you, I'll get these outcomes and blah, blah. And then the third question is, so if you decided you were going to do this thing, if you decided you were going to just sign these forms, is there anything that might get in the way? Right. Have you ever tried to make the switch before? What's happened? Right?
Okay.
Is there anybody who might be upset by this? So maybe you might find out that this was your dad's financial advisor and your dad's going to be upset, or it's a long-term family friend and you don't know how to deal with the difficult emotions around that. And so you just take people through this 3 steps. What, are we doing the right thing? Is this, would it really make a difference if you were to make this effort? And what might get in the way? Some variation on those 3 questions. And often what you'll find out is that you're getting not a solid green light on each of those, but there's a yellow light in there somewhere, or an absolute red. And then that just gives you the opportunity to say, oh, I'm so glad we had a chance to discuss this. I'm sorry that I didn't understand what was going on here, right? You just take it on the chin. I'm sorry, I didn't get it. Tell me about it, right?
I think you've called this the 3 C's: conviction, connection, and confidence. So if you can cascade through these different steps, you're probably not going to get, like you said, a bright green light at every step along the way, because if there were, you'd probably have adherence to the advice that's being given. This is sort of almost like a diagnostic tool where, oh, okay, this is the pain point. This is the question that seems to be stumbling them. And I imagine
there, because sometimes you do have a green light on every,
okay.
I do this at the end of every clinical meeting I have, and pretty much every coaching meeting I have. I make sure that we've got a green light, because if you don't have a green light, that's when you're likely to not get it follow through, or it might be kind of choppy. And so, much of the time you do, but the very fact that you're asking these questions can help to fuel motivation in as the person leaves the office, right? All you have is the time with this person, either on the computer or in your office. And in that time, you can do the best that you can possibly do to remind them of their own best intentions and to help strategize around what could get in the way. But if you haven't got an unambiguous green light on something, just know that this might not happen. And you can offer to make yourself available to them if and as that would be useful to them. You may become part of the plan for overcoming those barriers. You may become part of what they identify as resources in that 3rd question, what might help you with the task. You could help me. My team could help you. But just a quick check-in before you give any homework that the person is expected to implement independently really helps make sure that you've maximized the likelihood of follow through.
Okay. So in the chat, Werner Jansen, who's one of our friends from Australia, asks or poses the puzzle. He says, big challenge is getting clients to adopt advised cash flow systems, cash flow planning. So they spend a lot of time clarifying how they can lead a great life with spending in the right way. Clients still struggle to change those spending patterns and spending habits. I mean, I'm guessing that sort of scenario with the need to change spending behavior is probably one of the bigger examples you come across with the advisors that you work with every day.
For sure. And with some of the clients that they send me. And interestingly, right, this can be a problem across the wealth spectrum. Right? You can overspend no matter where you are in that. So sometimes what you want to do is just harness the power of the default, right? Let's have those defaults working in people's favors. So just, can you get the automatic savings in place? Can you make sure that bills that there's just so many different ways to deal with this. My mind is
Yeah, yeah.
my mind is
Systems are your friends.
systems are your
Systems are your
friend.
friend in this scenario to some
That's
extent.
right. And recognizing where are systems, where is the nudge for harm happening, right? Like
What do you mean? What's nudge? What do you mean nudge for harm?
The defaults or the nudges that a lot of companies put in place to make it easier to do welfare reducing behaviors. So the sorry, Amazon, but things like Amazon one-click ordering, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so sludge free
Yeah,
that,
slick.
yeah, it is just, yeah. Slick is a great word for it. So that's a case where you can work with clients to voluntarily put some sludge back into the process, sludge that works for their welfare. So for example, just unclicking one-click ordering, all you have to do, you can still do what you want to do, but you have to go to your wallet and enter the information every time. And it turns out that if you can put about 15 to 20 seconds between you and the undesirable behavior, that you dramatically reduce the likelihood of the undesirable behavior. And it works the flip way too.
Yeah, I was going to say the opposite must be true. If you can eliminate 10, 20 seconds between you and a good decision, it probably is much easier.
Yeah, especially if you add to that consciousness, right? Like memory that, oh yeah, I wanted to do this thing. I didn't want to do that thing. So that people aren't just doing the thing mindlessly.
Right.
Or the status quo. So yeah, there are some really neat things that can be done to deal with the overspending problem. But again, going back to what is the smallest step? That's often, can we build some momentum? Can we help keep the desired behavior front and center? Can we celebrate along the way? Can we make sure that we're not pushing people into deprivation? Because sometimes they'll try and slam it into reverse when they're still going 100 kilometers an hour down the road. That is not good for one's transmission, and it's not good for one's financial life either. People in deprivation will break out at some point and go back to what they did because they're just so unprepared to deal with that. And sometimes advisors, this is often a new advisor problem, they'll often almost collude in putting together plans that are just excessively ambitious. So again, this is where expertise helps, not just technical expertise, but expertise at the change process, making sure that things are not happening too abruptly and in too widespread and ambitious a manner.
Okay. Boy. So we have just a few moments left, so maybe a little bit of a rapid fire. But these are going to be big questions, so you're kind of on the hot seat to come up with a clever answer to deep questions. So, couple friends in the Q&A. Lay asks whether the strategies that you've written about are how applicable are they across different cultures and cultural backgrounds, and how kind of custom and sensitive an advisor needs to be when working with different cultures, different generations. Basically, one size fits all with a little bit of tweaking, or you really have to, and I'm going to throw in a big word with 3 minutes left, empathy. You really have to show up where somebody is and understand where they're coming from.
Back to they're the experts on their life.
Yeah, that's good.
In the context of their life. That's what the S in the facts paradigm is about. That that the social environment, including culture, including support, including values, sometimes even including regulation and law, right? Like it varies from subculture to subculture, and from country to country when you're getting up. So you really do need to have the discipline of checking in and making sure that this fits with the culture that the person is in. You're not going to be, you're not going to get very far if you are telling a Muslim parent that they should charge interest with their own children for a house loan. I mean, that will not fly in most Muslim families. It's absolutely anathema. So finding out what will work with each culture, and you don't have to be the expert. They're the expert. You just have to be willing to ask the questions.
So another friend, Stephen Edwards, has asked about the so-called serial position effect. Basically, the order in which you ask questions or assign tasks and the impact that has on adherence and good outcomes. So the general question is, does when you deliver deliver advice, how much does that matter relative to how you deliver, what actually the advice is? And I would add another level or maybe a framing to it, which is back to your small steps, small wins. Do we want to start with the small things and get a sense of momentum? Or do we start with big things so that those are being tackled? You know, the big things by definition matter more. Do we start with big stuff that they need to get done with their financial plan, with their estates, with all those sorts of things?
Yeah, there isn't one size fits all. Momentum is what matters to people. You need to find out what is top of mind and top of heart for them, and co-create that. Often, because you are in the position you're in, you'll just be able to move a lot of those big blocks for them, and that in itself is really encouraging for them. But it goes back to co-create, co-create, co-create.
So this was one of the fastest hours I've spent in a very long time. So I'm going to wrap up with one question, because my sense is that anybody who showed up on the call today, anyone who's listening to the replay, is thinking about what it means to be an implementation partner. And I guess maybe leave us with a little bit of your wisdom, your advice on how an individual advisor or an organization filled with advisors can begin to triage their own effectiveness at driving adherence, and how they can do just a little bit better in the months and years to come.
One of the biggest predictors of client satisfaction is the amount of airtime they get in a meeting, especially in the initial meetings. But it's a really common error for people, especially when they're nervous, to just want to talk a lot and tell them how you can be helpful and talk about your process and what's going to happen. So one thing is simply hush. Learn how to ask the kinds of questions that bring people out, and that start creating the bond with you that allow a sense of safety, that allow them to really sense that working with you will put them in good hands. How can advisors and the firms around them begin to really make a difference here? Part of it is, setting the intention that we're going to try to do this differently, doing things like having people come into the meeting for the express purpose of observing how you're doing. You can set it up so that you get feedback from clients on how you did. You can sign up for programs like the extraordinary one that you and Joy and Neil have put together that teach new skills assertively, right? Like here's a lesson on one aspect of empathy, and now here's another lesson, and just making that commitment to take the knowledge and now go and practice, month after month, to follow up with things like that. Those are
Yeah.
some ways.
Yeah, this idea of practice it's really important. It might sound kind of trivial or something, but the idea that this isn't something that you learn to do once and you're off to the races. It's something that you build up you build muscle memory, and you hopefully end up in a better place. So, Moira, that's our time together today. I'm glad I had more time with you last week in person, because this would not have been enough just for me. I hope everybody enjoyed the call. This is part of our OCBO experience. So for those who are OCBO members, the replay, the transcript, special comments will all be available for you. And Dr. Somers, thank you so much. We all greatly benefited from your kindness and your wisdom today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And take care, everybody.